Welcome to part 1 of my Async.net talk. In this part we'll cover the introduction and look at some of the whys and why nots of why you should or shouldn't use Async.net. Firstly, my name is Franz Lutzen. I'm the CTO and co-founder of New Orbit. We are a software company based in Chalkrow, which is just outside of Oxford. Just before I actually go into Async, let me just tell you a little bit about how wrong about what about everything that I thought I knew about Async. When I first thought I'd do this talk, I'd already been writing large-scale systems in Azure and using lots of Async for a long time, and I really thought I know everything about Async. This I know. So I thought this is going to be really easy to write this talk because I have all of these facts that I know for dead certain is true, and I just have to write a few code samples to demonstrate why they are the way they are. And then I realized that all of my facts were, should we call them alternative facts? It definitely wasn't true. I had to relearn everything, and the presentation you're about to see today is the result of that process of relearning everything. What I'm going to cover in the whole set of videos, I've divided into a few, but I'm going to cover why to use Async in C#. I've got some brain teasers that'll be in the next video. After that, we'll cover how Async in C# actually works underneath the covers. Then we're going to look at how threads present themselves in async code. I have a special video just on deadlocks, and then there's some tips, and then we'll conclude. Okay, so without further ado, more ado. All the code is on GitHub. I'm probably going to say some things that you don't believe. I have put the sample code on GitHub, and you can have a look at there. If you do find something I've got wrong, please do ping me on Twitter, and I will correct it. So, why should you use Async in C#? Well, apart from the fact that everybody tells you that it's the best thing in the world, and don't worry, I will not going to give you a sales piece or spiel. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times why Async is the best thing ever. So, good reasons for doing it is you can scale your website more. What people will normally tell you is that it's about thread starvation, because if you block a thread serving one request, it can't serve another one. In truth, if you're running on something like IIS, even as a proxy, even with ASP.NET Core, you typically will have either IIS or Nginx in front of you. But to use IIS as an example, it will usually spin up between 100 and 1,000 threads per core on your server. That exact number depends on a whole bunch of factors. But if you have 400 or 500 concurrent users, you'll probably find that a single core will have enough threads to serve all of them simultaneously without you having any problems. So in truth, unless you are in the top few percent of websites, it's unlikely to be a problem for you in the real world. Okay, and since it doesn't make it fast on its own, the scalability is there, but you probably don't need it unless you are one of a very few select people. If you're writing Windows apps, desktop apps, phone, desktop, etc., it does make them more responsive. More to the point, those things have an UI thread that you mustn't block, and it used to be quite complicated to write code that wouldn't block the UI thread and still do I/O and stuff like that. Async makes that so much easier, so it's definitely worthwhile doing. And finally, something I use quite a lot is highly parallel I/O operations to really make things scale out. As an example, I've had for some data migration code we wrote, I had 2,000 parallel tasks running in parallel, inserting data into table storage, and those are kind of things. It's actually quite easy to write with async code, and would be a lot harder to write with, say, threading or other mechanisms. Sometimes async can be faster than threading, but if you look at it completely in isolation and don't have contention issues, nothing beats synchronous code. Async will always be a bit slower than synchronous, but you're trading scalability for performance in theory. Sometimes async uses less memory than threading, not always, but sometimes, and it's usually easier to write async code than threading code, except when it isn't, but we'll cover some of that. There are problems. In principle, it can make your code a bit slower. We are talking a handful of nanoseconds because of the async await sugar and the state machine that comes with it. Very few people have to worry about it. Again, I'll cover where that comes in later and some examples of it, but you probably don't want to worry about it. But it is worth noticing that like for like, async code will be slightly slower than synchronous, rather than slightly faster than what a lot of people seem to think. There can be subtle bugs in your code. I'll give you some example. It's usually to do with the threading, so that's the thing. It can be harder to debug. It often is. That is something that's improving, but if you learn Visual Studio 2017, for example, the stack traces are not helpful, and the debug support can be very flaky and sometimes just break on you. I'm sure that we've seen improvements in that. We get some much nicer stack traces now from async, and I'm sure VS 2019 will be more solid, etc. Okay, that's the end of this video. The next video will be about brain teasers.